When we think about the British takeover of India, we usually picture armies and flags and a classic imperial conquest. But what if that's not the real story? What if it was actually the most audacious corporate heist in all of history, pulled off by a publicly traded company that had its own private army? And that's the big question, right? How on earth did a for-profit corporation, the East India Company, manage to bring one of the richest empires in the world to its knees? The answer isn't just about having better guns. It was about a brilliant and an absolutely ruthless corporate strategy. I mean, just look at these numbers. They tell you everything you need to know about the sheer imbalance of it all. At the Battle of Plassey, the moment that really kicked off British rule, the company had maybe 3,000 soldiers. They were facing an army of 50,000. It should have been a total wipeout. But the thing is, the battle was won before a single shot was really fired. The company had already bribed the enemy's top general. So this wasn't a battle. It was a hostile takeover, sealed with a backroom deal. Okay, so to really get how this heist was even possible, we've got to pan out and look at the scene of the crime. Back in the 17th and 18th centuries, India was an economic superpower, and pretty much every player in Europe wanted a piece of the action. So let's meet the rival crews who are all converging on this incredible prize. First thing you need to know, the English were seriously late to the party. The Portuguese had been there for over a century, then came the Dutch, the Danes, and the French. The Indian coast was a crowded, super competitive place. It was a total free-for-all, with each European power setting up its own company to try and muscle in on all that lucrative trade. And each of these crews had a totally different playbook. The Portuguese were all about controlling the sea routes. The Dutch, they were obsessed with getting a complete monopoly on trade. The French were masters of diplomacy, playing the political game. And then you had the English. Their main goal wasn't national glory or religion or anything like that. It was just profit. And that single-minded focus on the bottom line made them more flexible, more adaptable, and in the end, way more dangerous than anybody else. So why was this prize just sitting there, ripe for the picking? Well, the vault was basically left wide open. The central power in India, the incredible Mughal Empire, was falling apart. After its last great emperor died, the whole thing just descended into this chaotic Game of Thrones-style power struggle. Local governors and princes started breaking away, creating a massive power vacuum just waiting for a clever outsider to exploit. So you've got a fractured empire and all these rival crews fighting for the prize. How did one company manage to outplay every single one of them? Well, they didn't just have a plan, they perfected a master plan for conquest that was as genius as it was cynical. But here's the kicker. The British didn't even come up with the playbook. They basically stole it from their biggest rival, the French governor, Dupleix. And his formula was brilliant. Step 1. Don't bother with a full-scale invasion. Instead, find two local princes fighting over a throne. Step 2. Back one of them with your highly disciplined European army. Step 3. When your guy wins, he repays you with land, money, and exclusive trading rights. It was conquest by proxy. And this brings us to the mastermind of the whole operation, Robert Clive. This guy started out as a simple company clerk, an accountant basically. But he saw the absolute brilliance of the French formula, and he applied it with a level of aggression and cunning that just left everybody else in the dust. Clive wasn't just playing to win, he was playing to take over the entire board. Clive's strategy really came down to two key moments. Plassey, like we saw, that was the initial break-in, a conspiracy that was disguised as a battle. But the Battle of Buxar 7 years later, that was a whole different story. This was a real fight, where the company's small army totally crushed the combined forces of three major Indian powers, including the Mughal emperor himself. After Buxar, it was clear this heist crew could outmuscle the original owners. And that victory gave them the ultimate prize. The defeated Mughal emperor granted the company the Diwani of Bengal. What's the Diwani? It's the right to collect all the tax revenue from the wealthiest province in all of India. This changed everything. The company wasn't just a trading firm anymore. It was now a government. It literally owned the cash machine. So, with military control and all that revenue, the company's focus shifted. The next phase of this heist wasn't going to be fought with guns. It was going to be fought with bureaucracy. This was conquest by pen and paper, using contracts and policies to cement their control and lock down the loot for good. First up, the subsidiary alliance. On paper, it was a protection deal. An Indian ruler signs a treaty, and the company stations its protective troops in his kingdom. But here's the catch. The ruler had to pay for those troops, and the cost was intentionally set so high he could never afford it. When he inevitably couldn't pay, he was forced to hand over huge chunks of his territory instead. It was a perfectly designed debt trap. And then there was something called the doctrine of lapse. Think of this as the ruthless fine print in their rulebook. It said that if any Indian ruler died without a direct male heir, his kingdom would just be automatically absorbed by the British. This conveniently ignored the ancient Indian tradition of adopting an heir, and it allowed the company to just legally swallow entire kingdoms, like Jhansi and Nagpur. And to squeeze out every last drop of profit, they completely rewrote the rules of land ownership. They rolled out 3 different tax systems across India, but honestly, each one was just a slightly different machine for sucking up wealth. Whether they were empowering predatory tax collectors or hitting peasants with impossibly high taxes, the entire agricultural economy was re-engineered for one purpose: drain the country dry with cold, calculated efficiency. Look, you can't pull off a heist on this epic a scale without some serious consequences. 100 years of systematic looting, of broken promises and stolen kingdoms, it created this deep, simmering rage all across the subcontinent. The company had successfully plundered India, but in doing so, it had made an enemy of pretty much everyone. And as you can see here, the anger was everywhere. Peasants were crushed by impossible debts. Princes had been stripped of their kingdoms and their dignity. The Indian soldiers, the sepoys, in the company's own army were treated like second-class citizens. Local artisans were going bankrupt because of cheap British imports. Even priests felt their religions were under attack. Every single part of society had a reason to be furious. And these weren't just vague feelings. They were very specific grievances. One-way free trade policies had completely destroyed India's world-famous textile industry. The takeover of a huge, loyal kingdom like Awadh on a flimsy excuse of misgovernance sent a shockwave of fear through all the other rulers, and new social laws were seen as a direct assault on both Hindu and Muslim traditions. So, by the middle of the 19th century, the situation was just explosive. You had 100 years of humiliation and exploitation packed into a giant powder keg. As one historian put it so perfectly, the wood and petrol were ready. All it needed was a spark. And that spark came from the most unlikely of places, a rifle cartridge. The army introduced a new Enfield rifle, and its paper cartridges had to be bitten open before you could load them. A rumor spread like wildfire among the Indian sepoys that the grease used on those cartridges was made from cow and pig fat. To Hindus, the cow is sacred. To Muslims, the pig is forbidden. This single, perceived insult was the final indignity. It was the trigger that unleashed a century of fury in what we now call the Great Revolt of 1857. The story of the East India Company is just a staggering example of corporate power gone unchecked. It shows how a private company, driven only by the need to make profit for its shareholders and accountable to literally no one else, could conquer an entire nation. And it leaves us with a pretty heavy question to think about. When a country is run like a for-profit business and its people are treated like items on a balance sheet, is a violent rebellion not just a possibility, but an inevitability?